Welcome back to the Brianna Approved YouTube channel, where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into episode 11 because some of us are visual learners, but you can also listen to the full episode on all the podcast platforms. But I wanted to talk a little bit about our heart-brain connection because I think we say things like, speaking from the heart or, what would your heart say, right? Like we say these things all the time and there's a reason for that. And so what the research is finding is that our heart is much more than just this, organ that keeps us alive and pumps blood. It actually produces some of these hormones that can influence how we feel. So the emotions that we are feeling in our body can directly have this conversation with our brain. And if anything, we're finding that our heart to our brain conversation is influencing much more than what's going on from the brain to the heart. And so the heart is much more than just this like organ that keeps us alive, right? It actually produces certain hormones. And I talk about this on the episode, but it's really cool because one of them is something called atrial peptide, which is like this balancing hormone. So it can influence things like, blood pressure and your kidneys and your adrenal glands, which is again why when we have our physical heart, right? But we have our emotional heart. So if you've ever gone through something that's like emotionally taxing, you probably feel that elsewhere in your body, right? And so in Chinese medicine a lot, they talk about this idea of Shen, right? Which is like your heart spirit. And so there's a lot of really nice botanicals and herbs that can support heart Shen and support that emotional heart. So things like, motherwort can be really nice. Even things like albizia, rose, hawthorn, some of these things that can be a little bit more cooling in nature, right? And balancing some of that emotional stuff out. So, don't underplay that idea of like, when you're feeling something emotionally, you can feel it physically everywhere. You may have experienced this when you've gone through a heartbreak and you feel like you quite literally want to die, right? Because this conversation from our heart to our brain is what can release things like oxytocin and dopamine, which we can also then have withdrawals from. We also know that from an electromagnetic standpoint, right, the heart is this really huge electromagnetic field that can produce these different, quote, vibes, if you will, which again is why when you're going into a room with someone, you might feel something from somebody and not really understand why, because our heart produces these electromagnetic waves, which can reach pretty far out into the physical world. There is also this idea of heart-brain coherence, which kind of talks about when just like everything is jiving and vibing in your life and sort of flowing, and this idea of our emotions and our physical worlds kind of colliding and being balanced. And what they have found is that when there is this heart-brain coherence, we can actually produce something called alpha waves, which is the same waves that we produce when we are like meditating. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I do not find meditation relaxing, but we can also have our own forms of non-traditional meditation. This can be, hugging somebody. This can be walking on the boardwalk. This can be, being in that kind of transcendental state where it's like when you first wake up and you're not totally awake and you're kind of like in between mental emotional states. This also produces alpha waves. So when we have this heart-brain coherence, we can experience this alpha wave cohesion. And there are a couple of other ways that you can do this as well to kind of get everything in balance and take care of that physical emotional heart. So let's not underestimate things like the power of laughter, right? It's free and it's one of the best things that can actually release endorphins in the body, which can have a nice balancing and harmonizing effect in the body. We also know things that are tactile. So, massage, even cupping, right, can be really nice. Weighted blankets, that's why there's research on that for helping to balance things out for that heart-brain coherence. And then, there's things, like I said, like walking and other ways to release oxytocin, such as hanging out with a friend and developing emotional bonds, right? There's research that talks about like being around animals. So it doesn't have to always be having sex or being in love romantically. It can also just be experiencing emotions of gratitude and emotions of love as far as light and happiness and joy, and even self-love. And so positive psychology is something I'm going to talk about on episode 12 of the podcast. And this is just my reminder to you all that all emotions serve a purpose. It's a language in the body. It's how our body communicates with us. So try and listen to them before you, suppress them. And as we know, what we resist persists. So that's my reminder to kind of be where you are with that and understand that it's all serving a purpose, and you got to just sometimes just ride that wave of whatever emotion you're on, because high tide, low tide, they all serve a purpose. So thank you so much for chatting with me and learning a little bit more. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see y'all next week. Ciao.